Bob,
Yo.
good afternoon, man.
Yeah, thanks, man.
How's life been?
Busy, yeah.
Busy?
Just
What you been
cruising
up
along.
to?
Just went out to Fort Wayne last week, did a mural.
Nice.
Then immediately got back here, had the itch to keep painting, so went to 78th Street this weekend and got rained out I started painting my wall, redoing my wall
I
there.
saw that. How large is the mural? The latest mural?
The one at 78th, it's probably about 12 feet tall, 20 something feet long. Yeah.
Wow.
So
How
just
long to paint?
uh, grand total is about 15 hours, so I did about 10 yesterday, 5 on Sunday.
Wow.
Finish it up right as the sun was setting.
What was who gave you the commission? Or how'd you get the
That
commission?
one there is, I actually reached out years ago, like almost 10 years ago, to Dan Bush, who owns the building.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just cold called him. I didn't even know him at the time. And I was like, man, it's a great wall, you know? And turns out he was like, hey, man, I'm a huge fan of your work. I'd love to have you paint it. And so, like I said, I did it almost 10 years ago, 2015. And it's been hanging out. And I just looked at it compared to the style I'm kind of working with now. I was like, it's time to redo it, you know?
How big was the mural in Fort Wayne?
Oh, the Fort Wayne one. That was a pretty big wall too. That was I mean, I had up to 30 feet in the air, but I couldn't get high enough with the ladders I had, so I was probably 20 something feet up, and then
Jesus.
the whole thing was about 20 something feet across.
How
Yeah.
do you how do you mic that out? How do you actually how is it you go from
Yeah.
a picture to
To the full size?
yeah.
Well, the easy way, which I didn't do for either of the last two walls we're talking about, the easy way is a projector at night. You can project your image. But when you don't have that option, like I didn't for these last two, you can, some people do like what they call a doodle grid nowadays, where
Yeah.
you put a bunch of scribbles on the wall and
How
kind
do
of
they
map that.
how do they figure that out with the doodle grid? Like I see that and I still don't understand.
Dude, that makes my brain go crazy. I tried it a couple times. You just, you kind of, certain people's brains work with like, a picture of a spiral and an apple
Yeah.
and a triangle.
Yeah.
And I look at that and it just makes my brain go haywire. So I do like, I could do like a traditional grid, like, battleship kind of thing. But with these walls, what I've been learning to do to save time is I'll just look for any markers on the building.
Yeah.
Window ledges, a gutter, anything that makes landmark points for me. And like at 78th Street, it was just these little rungs in the ceiling where I could count them. And I was like, okay, 4 across, go straight down. 4 across, straight down. And I could kind of make an invisible grid on the wall like that.
So let's back up.
Yeah.
You are your name.
Oh, who am I? I'm Bob Peck. Yeah.
Bob Peck.
Yeah.
And you're primarily what's your field of art?
Primarily, I do a lot of abstract these days. I come from a graffiti background. Still dabble with the graffiti thing. Never fully retired.
Yeah.
But yeah, abstract's the main thing I work with.
I have the pleasure of being a big fan of yours for a long time. Then
Thanks, man.
finally getting to meet you and get to collab with you was a real accomplishment. And your graffiti knowledge here in Cleveland, which is so fascinating. What was graffiti like back in the 90s?
It was fun. I mean, that's the first word that comes to mind because really Cleveland wasn't like how it is now. It was a much more just ghost town of a city, which meant you could get away with a lot more. Also, not everybody was carrying a smartphone, which nobody had smartphones back then. So you didn't have a camera in your pocket. You couldn't be a hero. So, I mean, we'd be out, painting on pretty much whatever we wanted. And even if somebody's like, I'm calling the cops, you're like, cool. I got about 5-10 minutes before they get here. I can finish this up, which happened quite a few times. So they literally be like, I'm calling the cops. And then like stand there like we're supposed to run. We're like, go call them then. Hurry up. Like, yeah. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
How back in the 90s, 'cause you've really, what's fascinating, at least what I think is fascinating about you, is you've seen the graffiti movement change.
Oh, yeah.
You were there, and the graffiti didn't really begin to take off here in America until what, the 70s or early 80s?
Yeah, mid 70s, I'd say, is the earliest where it really started getting noticed. I mean, there were people writing graffiti in the mid 60s is about where they're officially placing it at this point. But mid 70s is when people started to realize it was like gonna be a cultural movement, like a phenomenon. It wasn't just like a trend to one neighborhood.
When did you first encounter graffiti, and then when did you first start practicing graffiti, or when did you actually give it a shot?
Yeah, so my first encounter, I was young. I was 5 years old, maybe 6 tops, and I'll never forget. I lived over on Madison Avenue, and my mom was walking me to school, and there was this big bubble letter on the side of a garage, and it said Fernando. And every day I would just look at that thing, and I was like, man, that is huge. Because I was into art already.
Yeah.
I was drawing, cartoons and characters and stuff. But I was like, the whole time I would like question it, like, were they supposed to do that? Why is their name there? Who is Fernando? This guy's got to be important to have his name on the side of his garage. I had like hyped up this person, and it turns out it was probably just some teenager, who found a spot to paint their name. But that person started the whole pathway into like my teenage years when I found other writers and started really understanding what graffiti was.
That's when you could buy spray paint before you need an ID.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
could
yeah.
just walk in. Now, if you buy spray paint, they card you everywhere.
A lot of times they'll keep it behind cages. Even
Yeah.
you have to get somebody to unlock the cage and stuff. Yeah, it's a pain, but yeah.
So what was, I guess, going back to the early days, the early '90s, because I know, there's some just great stories there that you can talk about. How did you? So you encountered it at a young age. I know that there was a popular book that was being passed around, I believe in the '80s, about graffiti
Oh,
art.
subway art would be one of
Yeah.
them for sure. Yeah.
Right. That was wasn't there like a handful of them? Wasn't there like 100 of them that were published, but no one had the originals, and they were all like copied, and then you like copied the copy to.
Boy, that's a good question. I don't know. I never knew about like the limitedness of it. I know like there was always a few around in my neighborhood eventually, but like my friend who kind of mentored me, his name was Presto. He was a couple years older than me, so when I was a teenager, he was kind of just getting into the adult years of his life. So he took me under his wing, started giving me his stuff, like copies of Subway art and different movies like Style Wars and stuff like that.
And so did you trace so how did you figure out how to do subway art or graffiti art, the wording?
I never traced, because by the time I was like drawing or getting into drawing graffiti before I even painted on a wall, I had been drawing for years. I was trying to think how old I was. I was probably like 14 when I really started dabbling with graffiti. So I had enough capabilities where it's like I would look at what was in like Subway art as an example, and I wouldn't even do like a perfect copy of their stuff, because I had already learned like you don't do that. That's called biting,
Oh, okay.
So I would try to take elements of like a certain person's letter and stuff like that, and then make it my own. And you would add in characters, like they're taking stuff like Hagar the Horrible as a character or something like that, and then putting it next to graffiti. So I would do the same thing if I wanted like Bart Simpson next to graffiti. There's nothing wrong with that. You could copy that, but. Yeah, I mean, it was experimenting, and it's trying to even wrap your head around what you're doing. I mean, when I was a teenager, I thought the stuff I was doing was amazing. I was like, oh man, I'm so good. And I look back, I'm like, God, it's embarrassing. It's so terrible. So
how many taggers were there, do you think, graffiti artists were there in the '90s?
In Cleveland?
Yeah.
I mean, there was definitely a pocket full, like over on Clark Avenue, maybe like a half a dozen dudes whose names I would see. You had 113 Alley, which is sort of like my next pit stop in the graffiti world, where there was a handful of guys, again, about a half a dozen dudes. You had CST and those guys on the east side, again, about the same number. And then a few scragglers. So, I mean, it was a small community back then. I mean, it was like maximum 20-something people. I mean, at least that I knew of, that were out and active and had a name. So.
And then where would you guys normally, let me back up for a moment. Were there people coming into Cleveland to do graffiti art?
The only person I remember from the 90s, nowadays, yes. Nowadays, this is like a big tour spot. Like, people love coming here, and we can get into that. But in the 90s, it was like the only big name I remember was a guy named Upsky from Chicago. He wrote a book called Bombing the Suburbs. And he actually met up with my dude Presto, and Presto got a little story in the book. So he was the first guy where I was like, oh, this guy came from out of town just to paint in Cleveland. But the rest of the time, it was all people who were just either, their family lived here and they were stopping in for the summer or stuff like that. I didn't really start meeting out of towners and coming to paint here until like at least the late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah.
Wow. That's
it was Cleveland's graffiti scene in the 90s was very fledgling and sort of, I don't mean it in a negative way, but it was behind the times of like, especially like New York or LA or Chicago even. I mean, we had people doing doing it right, but we were still behind by a couple years in
Yeah.
terms of what was happening in other big cities.
Where did you often most go?
When I first started, there was a place called 113. It's an alley right between 112th and 114th on Detroit. Nowadays, it's all overgrown and it's a mess. But back in the day, it was a perfect line of garage wall backs, like backs of garages, and an alley ran through. And I started seeing literally the numbers 113 tagged around my neighborhood, and names like Rocks One, Mist, Ivan, all those guys. And I was determined to meet those dudes. And I was kind of scared at first because I was young, and I didn't know what I was getting into.
How old?
About 13-ish,
13.
yeah,
Wow.
maybe 14 tops. So I would take my bike and I'd ride through 113 Alley like on the weekends and
Yeah.
after school. And I was like, I just got to meet these dudes. And one day, I saw a couple dudes painting, but I was like too afraid to go in. And so I just kind of went around. And then eventually, the dude that I mentioned before, Presto, he opened an airbrush shop in my neighborhood. And I buddied up with him because I was like, I want to learn about this dude. And he was doing graffiti stuff. And so I kind of like just bugged the shit out of him. Every day I'd go into his shop and show him sketches and be annoying. And finally he's like, all right, I'm going to take you to 113. I'm going to introduce you to these other guys. Let's see what we can do, And
I'm guessing was that at day or night?
that was first time I met him was daytime, but then I met up with them. The first big moment was at night one time. Presto called me out. He's like, come meet up with the dudes. They're doing this Christmas wall. You can come and hang out. And, the whole time I'm sitting there and I'm asking a million questions. I'm like, what about this? And how do you do that? And I'll never forget, I think it was Rocks. He turned around and he's like, listen, man, sit down, shut up nicely. He said nicely, but it was like, sit down, shut up. And I think he said, drink this beer, and handed me a beer. And so I sat there, and at the very end, there was a space left in the wall. And I forget if it was Rocks or Presto, but one of the dudes was like, all right, get up, come over here. You can do, I don't even remember what I did. If it said like B-Man, which was my first name, or maybe I did a 113 or something. I don't know. It was so long ago. And it was just like this huge honor to be like called up to the wall to be able to paint on this wall. And it was like middle of the night, I was probably supposed to be at home. And it was just an incredible moment where I was like, all right, let's do this,
What year was this?
I mean, that'd have been like early, man. That'd have been like 92-ish, 93
Wow.
at tops, yeah.
Wow.
Because the next main wall I did on my own, well, me and my friend, was right on 116th. There's a factory called Kirby, and there's a big parking lot with a wall adjacent to it. And me and my friend pulled this move, the classic teenager move, where I'm staying at his house, and he says he's staying at my house. So both parents are convinced of that. And we sneak out, and there was in the parking lot there was security cameras that would sweep the whole lot like this. Okay. So my great idea was every time the camera would look away from the wall, we run out of the bushes and paint. Okay, so we're doing this, and it's working. Nobody's coming out for like a half hour. Then when finally we leave, I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, if somebody would have been watching, it would have been like a stop motion video, clean wall, little bit of graffiti, more graffiti, more graffiti, more graffiti with nobody there. And so thankfully, I think it was just being recorded, if anything. But that was our first one. And then like the next day, the whole neighborhood, all my friends gathered around. We took cool guy photos in front of it. And it just was this big rainbow, literally like rainbow filled mess. It said Uptown Art because we called our street 107 Uptown. We lived on 107th. Yeah. So
Where did you get your spray paint back then?
oh man, we wherever you could. I mean, we were lucky we had Packetans back in the day.
Oh, yeah,
So
I
you'd
missed
make
that
a run up
Maria.
to there and
Yeah.
grab paint. That was honestly for me, that was the main spot. I mean, I know a lot of other guys had a harder time getting paint. You'd have to go into a Kmart and kind of look like you were supposed to be there, and maybe grab some paint without paying. So yeah.
Do you remember how much a can of spray paint was back in the early 90s?
Yeah, I could probably get pretty close. It's a lot cheaper than it was now. At the most, it was probably like $2.50, $3,
Wow.
and now you're paying $9-10 a can.
$19.
Yeah,
And that's through Montana?
yeah, Montana, any of this stuff. Really, I mean, the cheapest good paint you're gonna find is like $6 a can, $6.50, $7, and then you're still paying for shipping.
So what was one of your most riskiest tags when you were growing up?
Oh, there's a few that come to mind, but I mean, the one that I felt like I was definitely in the most danger was so I was probably about 17, so we're talking, doing the math in my head, 94, 95-ish, give or take, and I usually always would have somebody go paint with me, and I was jonesing to paint, and nobody wanted to go, and so I was like, I'm going, middle of the night, I'm going. And so it's like, I don't know, 10 o'clock at night on like a Friday or Saturday. And I jump down onto the tracks in my neighborhood and walk them all the way down to like about West 73rd ish over that way. And there was a nice stretch of wall. And there was a gang, a pretty well known gang, and I'm not going to say names or anything, but if you were in that area, you know who they are in a minute, you'll know. They had that neighborhood kind of on lock, okay? And so we're at 73rd and Wakefield. And I was in the RTA tracks, which has big retainer walls.
Yeah.
So it's a big wall, tracks, big walls. You're kind of in like a tunnel, essentially, with an open top. And so I start painting, and I can hear noise up top, like a house party. And it's like 10 feet up and maybe, half a house over. So they can't see me. And it's like music playing and people, bottles clanking around and people talking. And I'm like, all right, well, this is a good distraction. I'm still going, doing my thing. And then I'd hear people come out a little closer, and I start getting nervous and pause, and then it'd go, kind of fade out. Well, after a few minutes, I heard something coming down the hill, and it was like a big grassy hill full of bushes, and I thought it was like a dog or something. I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna have to deal with this dog or whatever it is. And out jumps the dude, and it was like a silhouette I couldn't see because of the lights behind him. And I'm like, oh man, police must have come and busted up the party and smelled my paint down here. So I immediately throw my hands up. And I'm like, yo, I'm just down here painting. I don't want to get like shot over them thinking I'm like doing some crazy stuff. And I immediately see a dude who I wish would have been a cop instead, because this dude's coming at me full gangster, sideways gun, and he's eyeing me up. And I'm like, yo, man, I'm just painting. I'm just painting down here. And he's like, his first words as he's staring at me, he goes, yo, you know who I am? And he says his name. And I immediately knew his name because we all knew his name around the West Side. And he was like the OG of the gang, like the leader. And so as he's talking to me, he's got his gun to my face and he's like moving it around as he talks, just like this, And I'm just like frozen. And I'm like, every time the gun moved, I'm just like fatal, not fatal, fatal, not fatal. Like thinking if he pulls that trigger right now, how is it going to happen? What's going to happen? How's it going to feel? So then after a minute, like he starts talking Spanish. And I'm like, yo, dude, like, I don't speak Spanish. And he's like, I'm not talking to you. And I look up, and there's more dudes up here. Another guy, I think, had, like, a shotgun. And I'm like, yo, this is not going to end well. And the craziest part was I knew they were in that neighborhood. And I was going to kind of write, like, kind of a shitty remark about them because they had been tagging over everybody's stuff, just going over it, like, just to diss it. No particular reason. So I was going to leave a little remark about them. And I'm glad I didn't get that far on the wall.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so they were looking at my piece and they're looking at me, and like now there's like 10, 15 dudes on the train tracks. I'm like, what is going to happen? So finally, I'm like, I'm just nervous. I'm like, I want this to be over, And I look at them like, yo, you guys smoke weed? And they're like, yeah, hell yeah. And I had a blunt with me. And so thank God. So I lit it up and we're all passing this blunt around. I'm like, this is surreal now. Like, 'cause we're getting high, And after a few minutes, this dude's like, yeah, man, you know why I'm in Cleveland? I'm like, no. He's like, I'm on the run from LA. He's like, did you see me on America's Most Wanted? Like, he's bragging. I'm like, no, I must have missed that episode, man. I must have missed that one. And so, we smoked the blunt and it's like, party's over. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm just going to leave now. If you guys want my paint, take the paint. And they're like, no, man, finish your piece. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like trying to like not shake, and it's like these dudes are standing behind me watching. So they stand there for like an hour hanging out and having fun, and I'm just like freaking out. So I finish the piece, and as I'm done, I look at all of them and I'm just waiting for somebody to punch me, anything, I'm like, what is happening? And so I'm like, all right, you guys want the rest of the paint left? They're like, no, that's your paint. Take your paint, So I'm slowly bagging it up. I'm waiting to get kicked in the face or something. Nothing happens. I grab my backpack, I throw it on, I look one more time, and I'm like, all right, and I walk away like, what the fuck?
Oh, my God.
And I'm walking down the tracks, and as I'm walking, I can just feel them staring at me, and I'm just waiting to hear a gun, and I'm waiting to get shot in the back. And I get like a half mile away, and I look back one more time, and they're all still looking at me, and I just go full Olympic stride down the tracks. I mean, just gone. And so, Monday came around, and I had to go to school, and I took the train to school. And I ride the train past my piece, and sure as shit, it's just covered in their tags for their neighborhood and stuff. And I was like, all right, I see. They want me to take my time, finish the piece, waste my time and my paint, and then they're just going to immediately take the wall back to show me. All right. And it wasn't even taking the wall back. The wall was blank, but they said it was in their neighborhood. So,
Oh my God.
so that was definitely one of the scariest ones.
Holy moly,
Yeah.
that's an incredible story.
Yeah, man.
What's one of your most accomplished places you've tagged here in Cleveland or
Yeah. A lot of different things come to mind. I would say some of the ones that stand out, is like I did a lot with Gravity Games back in the day, which was kind of like the X Games.
I remember that.
Yeah, so they'd have me paint live and
early 2000s,
yeah,
right?
yeah, man. They treated us good. They give us passes and all
Holy
access.
moly, you did live painting of the Gravity
Yeah,
Games.
did Gravity
I
Games.
was there. Remember,
Yeah.
it was hot the one year.
Oh yeah, it was cool, man. I got to sit in like the press box with the camera swinging over my head for the half pipe finals and all that stuff. So that was cool. I did a lot of work with Red Bull back in the day.
Really?
Yeah, I did some stuff with Red Bull. Scion hired me for a couple different commissions over the years. And then, I mean, in terms of actually stuff that's permanent in town, I've done some really cool stuff with Crocker Park over the years. Did a 4-story garage with me and Rich Sylar. Each floor we did a different design. I've got some cool walls right in the neighborhood here where we're at right now over on Payne Avenue. There's me and my dude Mikey did like a big graffiti Gundam themed wall over there.
That was I saw you actually. I remember when you were painting that, and I would, what year was that? Was that 20?
That was about 21, I think.
21?
20, yeah, about that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember coming. I'm like, hey Bob.
Yeah, I remember seeing you there. Yeah,
I
yeah.
was, hey Bob, this is incredible. I don't know how you guys do it because I'm always in awe of graffiti artists
Yeah.
and how you guys are able to put that artwork up on the wall. And
Yeah,
such
it's just after a
definition and
while, it's
detail.
like it's instinct. I mean, it's muscle memory. It's like you start to remember. I mean, at first it's clumsy.
Yeah.
You run out of room or everything's cockeyed. But I mean, after years and years, you start to remember. Okay, learn from this mistake. Learn from that mistake. Don't do this. Do that. Kind of that kind of thing. So
Where's some of the is there still old graffiti art up, and where can we actually see it at? Is there anything that's like rare or antique in a way?
yeah,
where
I mean,
that's
there's stuff out there, man. Up
nostalgic?
until a few years ago, we had stuff from the '80s still riding in Cleveland, but unfortunately, some out of towners went over it because they didn't know. But I mean, if you ride the RTA line,
Yeah.
you're gonna see stuff from me and my friends, and even like just other guys from the city from the '90s. I mean, there's new stuff too.
Yeah.
But the guys they're painting now, they don't go over the old stuff. They'll go around it, near it, but they don't go over it. So I mean, I've got stuff from as old as like. For sure, I know 1998, 99 running
Oh, wow.
it's got the date on it. Yeah,
Really, still down
yeah,
there?
yeah. I mean, some of it's got like giant trees growing
Yeah.
in front of part of it
Yeah.
that didn't used to be there. That's how old.
I
but
think
yeah.
I saw when they put the bikeway in.
Yeah.
Along what is that? Up by 25th.
Like 25th, yeah.
There's
I
one
had
down there.
one of my first early pieces was down there, and it had survived because it was under
Yeah.
the bridge, so there wasn't any sun hitting
Yeah.
it, no rain. And unfortunately, after about a year of the bike path, they primed over it. But
Oh,
yeah,
that
I was
sucks.
stoked, man. I got to take one last picture with it
Bro,
like 25
that had
years
to
later.
That had to be heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was yeah.
And so why I don't understand them. Why would they? Did RTA do that? Did the state do that?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm imagining it's some, worker guy who got the
Yeah.
call, hey, there's graffiti. Because
Yeah.
they don't know the history and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And there were talks about like somebody talking to them, explaining like, hey, this is like almost like a historic piece now. And it just didn't happen. So it is what it is. I mean, graffiti is never meant to be permanent. You paint it and you hope it rides. Like anything I paint that's not a commission, I'm like,
Yeah.
if this makes it a week, it's good. If it makes
Yeah.
it a month, better. A
Yeah.
year, awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Did you ever do cold storage there in Tremont?
No, I had friends that painted that place, but I never was in there. Yeah, so definitely. Had
Why?
friends.
Why didn't you do cold storage?
I don't know. I just never got around to it. I was more about like during like the peak of me still kind of painting illegally. Like I loved going on the RTA Rapid line.
Yeah.
There was something real serene about it for the most part when I'm not having guns in my face. But I liked when it was peaceful down there. You could just hang out and chill, bring a beer.
When would you go? Would you go like dead of the night?
Yeah,
early in
middle of the
morning?
night. I mean, sometimes we were kind of ballsy. I remember one time we really wanted to paint, and it was like late fall, like around Thanksgiving, and so the sun was setting at like 5:30, 6 p.m. My dudes are like, "Let's go." I'm like, "Let's go." It's rush hour, so we're right by downtown, like by the buildings next to downtown, coming out of Public Square, and there's just trains full of commuters. I mean, packed with business people coming by while we're painting, and you just duck into the shadows every time, and
Wow.
life goes on. Yeah.
There's no like sensors down there. Or
No, I mean there definitely wasn't back in the day.
Not back in the
Technology
day.
back then, cameras were this big, so
Yeah.
Back then, it
Holy,
was
holy
easy.
moly.
Yeah.
Yeah, thinking about that. Yeah, yeah, I know that when I take the RTA Rapid, it's incredible to see it all. And the unfortunate part is that the RTA, I guess RTA should do some sort of graffiti tour. Would be incredible.
They're
You know what
real
I mean?
sketched out on the word graffiti. Like
Are
they
they?
have, they've teamed up. RTA's teamed up with Land Studios over the years, and
Oh,
they brought
okay.
in like muralists and
Yeah,
stuff. But once you bring in the G word,
yeah.
everybody starts trembling,
Everyone's
because they're like they immediately associate it with vandalism. I've had people have the misconception that it's gang related,
yeah,
So there's all these stigmas around graffiti. I mean, I will say, all in all, Cleveland as a whole is pretty accepting of graffiti.
yeah.
You can go to a business owner and they get it. They're not like freaked out, but like the in terms of like any public entity,
Yeah.
they don't want to come too close to it most of the time. Yeah.
We're gonna take a moment to take a big shout out to Stami Paul
Oh yeah, Stami.
at,
Yeah.
at Graffiti Heart for spearheading all that she does
Yeah.
around graffiti art, murals. Amazing accomplishment.
Yeah, Stami's been doing some cool stuff in the city, man. She's on her 10th year now.
Yeah. I'm in
She,
awe every time I walk in that building, and I look at all the, magazine articles
yeah.
and
She's
all
doing
the
some cool
awards.
stuff, man. And I mean, she's still every year she's figuring out where she wants to steer the ship
Yeah.
next. Now we've been doing gallery shows at the
Yeah.
building for the last year or so.
Love it.
And we're talking about doing hopefully doing a big block party with live painting
Oh, that'd be
next year.
awesome.
Yeah, there used to be back in the day. Speaking of Land Studio earlier, they were called Cleveland Public Art, and they actually held the first graffiti festival in Cleveland, first and only.
Really?
Yeah, early 2000s, 2001 ish. Maybe 2002 as well.
Wasn't Lillian Curry? At
Yeah, that was
Grand Street?
Lillian and Greg Peckham and everybody back then. Yeah, and Melanie Fiorito. So they call it was called City Expressions. It was right in Ohio City, right across from the West Side Market, and that was pretty cool. It brought a lot of people together. I still have friends to this day who we met at City Expressions.
Wow.
And it was 30, 40, 50 people painting, DJs, all that stuff. So it had its ups and downs, but it was cool overall.
Did you do any bridge painting?
Like being up on bridges.
Yeah, on the beams.
Well,
underneath?
so I'm terrified of heights. Okay, so that was always a no pun intended a downfall for me. But I did do. I mean, I was doing billboards back in the day because, like, quite honestly, I was partying a little too hard.
What was one of your coolest billboard locations?
Definitely the billboard. The graffiti's long gone, obviously,
Yeah.
but the billboard is still structurally there. Right on Edgewater by the sewage plant. When you come around the bend by
Oh,
Edgewater,
yeah, yeah.
there's two billboards right there.
Okay.
So me and my buddies would hit those once in a while because we knew how to like get up there and turn the power off on the lights. So we'd shut down all the lights, get out there, hang out. I mean, I'd be sitting with my legs hanging over there, drinking a beer, after we're painting, and then you kick the lights back on and leave. So that's a fun. We did right on the Detroit Shoreway. Not the Shoreway, sorry, Detroit Superior Bridge. There used to be billboards on the one building looking into downtown, and we got up there one night. It was like a Saturday night after the club, so we're talking like 2:30 in the morning, 3 o'clock, gone, just and up there, and I'm looking around like, all right, guys, there's cars hitting their horns and stuff.
Yeah.
We got to get moving. So we're painting this thing, and as soon as we're done, we're starting to climb down, and one cop car pulls in, and he's shining his light around because we had moved a dumpster to the fire escape to get to the dumpster up. And I'm like, yo, everybody go back up. So we're scrambling back up this fire escape that was already rickety. It had like fallen out of the wall on the way up. And so we're like, what do we do? What do we do? And I see the cop pull out and leave. And I'm like, all right, he either didn't see us or something's about to happen. Go, go, go. So we're all like sliding down the fire escapes and stuff, jumping, running for our lives. We get out of that lot. We get down the street, get in the car, and then come back up. And by the time, I'm talking in the matter of a minute and a half, 5 cop cars at least were pulling into that whole lot. And then lights on and searching for us. I mean, we just barely made it out of that one.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So dude might have
crazy.
saw us and was like, I don't know what I'm about to be
Yeah.
dealing with. I need backup. And so yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a time. We come from a time. You're a little bit older than me. Back before murals were actually even a thing here in Cleveland.
Oh yeah, it was like
You know,
one or two. Yeah, that I can think of.
And
Yeah.
so it was just graffiti art was the canvas.
Yeah.
For people to be able to express themselves in that way.
Absolutely, man. Yeah.
There was always that cigarette billboard. Remember, they're off MLK.
Yeah.
Right there on the right along the railroad tracks. There's that big building. They're that big, tall, white building.
Oh, okay, yeah, I know. I think I know what you're
People
talking about.
take that all the
Oh,
time.
yeah, I know what
and
you're talking. Yeah, that one. I know exactly what you're talking
yeah,
about now. Yep.
people tag along that railroad and
Yeah.
all those buildings. I remember
Yeah.
coming in, with my dad coming down to our office on the close west side throughout the '90s and obviously during the 2000s
Yeah.
and stuff. And yeah, seeing all the different tags.
Yeah,
along the
you
way.
just got to find spots where it's like high
Yeah,
visibility, but also you can get in and out without people seeing you. It's like it's kind of like a military mission at times. I mean, nowadays you got Google Earth. I know guys that are like zooming in places on Google Earth, marking, exit, entry, this and that. So yeah.
fascinating. So when did you transition from, I guess, or when did you go
Yeah.
from wall to canvas?
Yeah, so like canvases, I started, I would say early 2000s. I was going to a lot of gallery shows around town. I was interested in what was happening, but I noticed there wasn't any graffiti artists really showing.
Yeah.
Like Sano was here in town still.
Yeah.
He was kind of doing some gallery stuff. My dude Presto was as well, and I wanted to get in, but everybody, they were the two guys doing graffiti. Everybody else was doing, what you would expect in a gallery, and so I started doing graffiti on canvas, and so I would spray paint a bunch of random colors and
Yeah.
shapes, and then I would draw with paint markers
Yeah.
and acrylics graffiti on top. So pretty cut and dry. And as I was working, I started like in the backgrounds more than the graffiti. And the irony is, at the time, I hated abstract art. I thought abstract art was a scam. I thought it was like for people who weren't artists. I was like, it's bullshit. So as I'm working, I'm starting to really like these backgrounds. So I'm setting them aside, starting another, setting them aside, starting another. And I just had a harder and harder time putting the graffiti on top of these backgrounds. And so finally I showed my friend one of these paintings one day unfinished. And I go, what do you think of that? He goes, well, it's a cool start. When are you going to finish it? And I go, I think it's done. And he's just looking at me confused. Well, I had just stumbled headfirst into abstract art, And what I realized is it doesn't just, a lot of people when they hear abstract, they think it's just throwing paint at a canvas. And some of it is. I'm not going to lie. There's some abstract I don't like, But if you really do some well thought out abstract work, you can see it. You can tell that person knows what they're doing,
So your abstract style is very unique because how would you define it?
I would say, at first I used to say it was abstracted graffiti, and
Yeah.
it's grown further from that at this point. It's a graffiti influenced abstract style still, for sure. It's got like the graffiti funk to it, It's got the angles and the techniques. It's just not bound up by the letters anymore, so it's very free flowing.
Yeah.
And you might have covered a lot of the questions I'm going to ask, but I'm more interested in your past and what brought you into the graffiti world and being in it so earlier in its existence, some of the challenges and things that you've seen change over the years. From the street level, also bringing it more to, I guess, would we consider it a corporate level? I'm not sure.
I know what you mean. Yeah, just like working with clients and things like
Correct.
that.
From going from that street level of artistry and how you actually transitioned over into the clientele.
I mean,
area.
honestly, it kind of came to, like, I didn't go looking for it. It found me. So, like, one of the earliest things was I was at the Agora one night and walking around kind of, listening to whatever show I was at and tagging on stuff. And one of my friends ran up and they're like, yo, somebody's looking for you here. And I was like, oh, man, I'm in trouble. Like,
Like what I
because,
did now.
that always hit, if somebody's looking for you, it's never good. And they're like, no, they're from the Rock Hall and they want to meet you. And I was like, okay, and so I meet her. Her name was Santina Protopapa, and she was the like educations director for the Rock Hall. And she's like, I'm doing this like hip hop program, 4 elements of hip hop, and we want you to teach the graffiti aspect.
Wow.
And I'm just looking at her, and I'm like, teach graffiti at the Rock? I'm like, that's like teaching people how to steal a car, And I was kind of skeptical at first. But I was also hungry and broke, So I was like, I need that paycheck,
Right.
And so I felt it out and did 1 or 2, and I was like, all right, this is cool. So it was me doing the graffiti, my dude remix DJing. I'm trying to think who else. We had a couple local MCs come through, and everybody took their part. And then eventually, it left the Rock Hall and became its own entity called Progressive Arts Alliance. We started going into schools and residencies, and what I saw was, these kids were from the same kind of neighborhoods I was, where we didn't have art programs. We didn't have money. They didn't have anything. And so to bring something that they liked, like graffiti and hip hop, into the school, they were loving it. They were eating it up, and they were actually learning. And a couple of the students, man, I get chills just thinking about it, have gone on. I've kept in touch with them 20 years later. Wow. I mean, the one dude, Dakari, is doing stuff for like the New York Times and doing all these like incredible like collages for like huge high profile clients. And I'm like,
Nice.
yo, I remember when I was leaning over your shoulder in a classroom teaching you how to draw your name, you
Yeah.
know, and that's a great feeling.
He's from Cleveland.
Yeah, he's from Cleveland. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, we
That's
would love to
incredible.
reach out to him. and
Yeah,
try to get him
Dakari.
in.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
'Cause those are the type of stories that brought me along as well. I grew up in the Glenville area, and I didn't consider myself an artist, and I always say that. But I was in the construction field, and just with my dad learning how to manipulate different medians to make things that he wanted to see, little mask or whatever. And I, kind of spent my whole life not knowing that that was what art actually is, that the creation of everything was art. So those stories touched me a lot to be able to see someone get it in the right way with the right guidance to go down that path. And speaking of that, what brought you to the graffiti world? Like, who was your mentor?
Yeah, so, early on, I was just kind of like, just finding stuff and trying to like take pictures of it if I had a little disposable camera and just figure it out. I mean, like we were talking earlier, my dude Presto was the first real influence in my neighborhood when I was like a teenager, and he was a couple years older. So he was the first guy to teach me sort of the rules.
Gotcha.
Like, don't do this, do that. If you're going to do this, do that. And then he brought me up under him and introduced me to like a local crew, who then introduced me to other guys from like the east side, and it just kept kind of networking from there.
Is he still around?
Yeah, Presto's around. He's a tattoo artist. He keeps it underground, but he's in the city. So yeah,
Nice. Okay.
he likes to be low key. So yeah.
I guess my next question, and I'm sorry I jumped in,
No, it's
because
all
this
good.
all been on my mind.
That's
As
cool.
where do you see the scene now? So I saw, and I pay attention to graffiti. I worked in a train yard. I've done a little bit of things to kind of understand the world, but I don't know the rules, which I'll ask about those later.
Yeah.
But I saw this new bombing that's been going on lately, and it's some guy's or a crew has been extremely busy in the city right now.
There's definitely a couple guys that are
they're
work.
getting super active.
Yeah.
And I wonder, how do you feel about this scene in regards to the scene you grew up in? And
Oh
the thing
yeah,
that you
that's a
come
good question.
from?
Well, I mean, it's grown. You know, we were talking earlier about the '90s. I mean, there was like 20 people in the city painting, and at that time, maybe 5 were like really active, and the rest were kinda. But now, I mean, there's new faces every year, and they're doing crazy spots. Stuff that I would have never even dreamed of, and at the scale they're doing it all
Right.
illegal, like these giant block letters on the freeway. Like we were hitting freeways, but we were just doing quick tags and throw ups. Like
Right.
we get in, get out. These dudes are spending an hour because they figured out how to be sneaky and stealthy, where they're not even being seen, and they're getting this stuff up there. And you drive by the next day, you're like, is that supposed to? Like, it looks like it's supposed to be there. It's so well done.
Yeah.
So I'm impressed, and I will say, I mean, it seems like, at least from the people I meet these days, it's a lot friendlier. I mean, because like there was like a lot of competition, even though it was a smaller group back in the day. It felt like everybody kind of staked their claim on a territory, and it was like, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. And it was like, you met up once in a while and you painted together, but it just felt very, segregated. Whereas now, you see dudes like painting east side, west side, all over the place, and meeting up together to do all these different, areas too. So
Do you think social media and different things like that, or just the culture itself, lend a hand into the more collaborative? Because I noticed that as well as an artist, that Cleveland is way more collaborative than it used to be.
It's getting there, yeah.
And that's saying a lot for where it sits now, based on how we all know in the '90s how it was. It was, you got caught in the wrong spot doing the wrong thing, you didn't have to worry about the police.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yep, exactly.
So with that kind of thing going on, I wondered, or do you feel that social media played a part in that, in the growing the culture and getting people to be more collaborative?
Absolutely, because I mean, it was hard to find people back in the day. I mean, you were literally like, it was like throwing a message in a bottle. I remember the first time I found somebody from outside of my neighborhood. Well, one of the first times was I was on a RTA taking the bus, and these high school kids got on. And I was probably like 17, 18 at the time. And I had a sketchbook, a black book with me doing graffiti. And this one girl looked over. She goes, hey, my friend who goes to school with me draws stuff like that. And I go, oh, what's his name? And she's like, oh, he goes by Boog. And I'm like, Boog, I've seen that name around. So I literally like passed her a message with my info to get to. I'm like, I'm never going to hear from this dude. And like a week later, I did. It was like, we became friends, started painting here. But it was by chance. Nowadays, you can literally do hashtag Cleveland graffiti and see what's happening,
Okay.
and then message people and, start to like connect the dots,
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
And then my last one, you mentioned the rules. I don't know if that's something that you can share, publicly.
Yeah, I think it's good to share them. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But I know in the train system, one of the rules is don't paint over the numbers.
That's a big one.
That's a huge rule. Being in that system, we would leave graffiti as long as it was there, as long as we can read those numbers.
Yeah, you got to read the numbers so you know what's in there, what's going on.
What's in there, what's going on.
Exactly.
Numbers. What do you mean by numbers?
So there's serial numbers on the side of each freight car.
Yeah.
And it'll be a string of numbers like, about that big.
Yeah.
And that's how these guys read like where these trains are coming from, what's in them.
So that's how we know what's on the car, what's in the box,
Yeah.
where we're shipping, where to put it.
So the guys nowadays, they'll blend that into the artwork.
Exactly.
They'll actually like take tape off the numbers. I've seen them even stencil cut like so that they're perfect and like blend like it's seamlessly integrated into the art.
It's the rule that as long as we see numbers, we don't worry about, we don't repaint that car, we don't care what's on it as long as the numbers are
so
there.
I mean, with freight graffiti, that's definitely number one. I mean, I was never a big freight painter. I've painted my handful, but I've got friends that paint hundreds every year. But so I'm not gonna be like, oh, I'm a freight guy, just for clarity. But I mean, the other rule is like, don't leave your cans in the yard. That's a toy move. Like, you don't want to leave cans laying around for a number of reasons. One, some idiot can pick it up and dish your own stuff, or two, like it's evidence you were there.
Right.
Stuff like that. So, that. But I mean, in terms of painting in the city, the biggest stuff is like, I don't know if the rules have changed, but at least when I was, active, it was like, try not to hit up schools, definitely not churches, private vehicles like cars. I mean, if it's a box truck, it's going to probably get hit. But, don't paint somebody's Toyota Camry that they got to drive to work, shit like that. Libraries, I usually try to leave alone. Even like small businesses, like, I wouldn't try to like wreck a small business's like windows or anything.
Right.
Because I'm like, man, they're trying to make ends meet. I mean, now don't get me wrong, we would go to clubs like Peabody's and write all over everything, but they had money, so they were doing all right, And
that was Peabody. Wait, where was Peabody's at for you?
For me, it was down in the flats. Yeah.
Oh yes.
Also for us, it was on 22nd Street.
22nd.
Oh yeah. Well, I used to go to that one too.
You used to go to that one too?
Yeah.
Oh.
But I was old school, man. I was.
That's hilarious that we're that old that you got to ask.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
But yeah, and then the other big ones is obviously don't go over other people. Don't paint over other people. Throw ups cover tags, pieces cover everything. And if you're going to go over something, you better be able to burn it, So,
Right.
yeah.
That's cool.
What's one that you recommend that everyone go see here in Cleveland?
Oh,
if they
man.
could?
That's a good question. Obviously some of them are mine. No, I'm joking. No, I'm really trying to think outside of mine. No, I'll say for real. If you go right up Payne Avenue, there's a lot of stuff. Payne, and even on St. Clair now.
Yeah.
There's Days One. He does some really awesome work. Yeah,
Shout out
man.
to
He's been friends. We've been friends since high school. So he's got some real incredible work going up. Up and through the neighborhood there. Definitely check that out. And then if you go through the west side, you'll see some of my stuff, and I got some stuff out east here too. But that Days' work comes to mind first and foremost. And there's plenty of other artists too in the city for sure.
Where can we see one of the pieces that hit you most? Like what's a location that you see in the city that, whether it be, done corporate or street level, what's one of the pieces or the location to a piece that you can say, if you go here, you see this is beautiful?
Yeah, man, that's a good question, because some of the things that come to mind don't exist anymore. Right. They're not standing, so I'm thinking old school. So I've actually got to think like new school right now and think like what's like mind-blowing. I would say, some of the stuff that comes to mind is like, it's not what you would think, actually, because it's like, all right, Taki 183 was in town 2 years ago. And for those of you who don't know who Taki was, he's a pioneer of graffiti writing as you know it. Okay, so we're talking like, late 60s, this guy starts. There was other guys too, like Cornbread, who was also in town recently. Nice. So Taki, Cornbread, and a few other guys were, before graffiti was anything like you know it. It was like just local to New York and stuff. But anyways, point being is, Taki was here, and he got to hit a couple little spots around Cleveland, and there's like one in the flats, along with Blek Lorette from France, and then like just a couple spots, and it's literally, it just says Taki 183 in the most stick letter, kind of basic lettering you can imagine, but the fact that it's here in Cleveland, it's such a huge piece of history.
Wow.
It would be like if you found George Washington's signature on a bridge somewhere that had survived.
Yeah.
You're like, George Washington stood here and wrote his name on that.
Right,
It's like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like you stand there thinking like, wow, the man, one of the men who started this whole movement was standing right here looking at this.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Where do you see graffiti going in the future? I know that's a very broad question. You
Yeah.
can say a lot of different directions, but just to kind of sum it up, what's the most pivotal direction do you think?
It's getting way more technical now. I
Gotcha.
mean, there's stuff that dudes are painting, and I say dudes, it's also plenty of women, but like people are painting where I'm like, I don't even know how you pulled this off with spray paint. And I've been in the game for 30 years, you know?
Wow.
I mean, especially if you look at the dudes in Europe, I mean, they're doing these like, hyper realism, portraits alongside graffiti that is like tricks your eyes into looking like it's actually coming off the wall. I mean, we were doing 3D stuff back in the day, but you
Right.
could tell it was one dimensional. These guys are, when you stand at a certain angle, it looks like it's oozing onto the floor.
Yeah, that's
or they're
cool.
adding extensions to the roof of the building where there's an arrow die cut off the wall.
Yeah.
I'm just like, we would have never imagined doing this level of work back in the day,
Wow.
Yeah.
I've seen some cool stuff in Europe through Instagram and other websites where it is that way, where they're using foam or using boards to actually
build it
extend it out
Yeah.
past the realm of just flat work.
So yeah, I think it's just going to get more. It's going to blur the line of one-dimensional and three-dimensional work, especially as virtual reality becomes more of a commonplace thing. You're going to have, I mean, you're potentially have graffiti popping out at you, like jumping at you from around the corner of a building when you walk down the street. It'll get more into like hacking, where somebody hacks your visor thing you're wearing, or whatever it is, to actually have their name spring out at you. I can totally see that. In the future.
That's pretty cool.
Has anyone done a book on Cleveland graffiti?
Cleveland specifically, yeah, there was a couple. Like one that comes to mind. Oh, I hate to say if I can't even remember the name now. This one guy, and I can't remember. I feel like his name was Larry. This was like 20 years ago, so forgive me for not being able to remember. He did a book where he was a Joe average guy, had no art background or anything, but he was real interested in graffiti. So he started following the clues, like the trails, and documenting like a diary, like a journal of whose art he had found on what place. And then eventually he started running into guys and meeting them and just be like, hey man, I'm just trying to learn, And we let him follow us around for like a summer, and he wrote his book, and it was cool. Yeah, it was really cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I wonder if you get that at the library.
I'll get you the name. It's at home. I have a
At
copy.
home. How has the graffiti paint changed? I guess you were alluding to it's getting more realistic, and so obviously you've been doing graffiti art for decades now,
Right.
And so So you talk about people are getting photorealistic on graffiti. I've been to Valparaiso in Chile, which is a seaside town, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site for graffiti art.
Yeah.
Right. So it's incredible because there's, tens of thousands of actual pieces of work, and so if something actually happens to the building, like they can't touch the building. If the building burns down or collapses, like it's just going to stay that way forever.
Wow.
Because there's artwork on the wall. It's how it's revered, and so I've seen some of this photorealistic graffiti work in Valparaiso back when I was there in 2018. I was in Europe and I saw a lot of graffiti art. A lot of it was like what you would see here in the States.
Sure. Yeah.
But like, can you speak to kind of what they're possibly doing there to get the photorealistic with spray paint?
Well, a lot. When graffiti first started, it was very street level. Meaning it was guys in the hood, working with what they had, which was most of the time, like myself, next to nothing.
Yeah.
You were stealing a couple cans of paint, and you were lucky if your friend had a can of black, you could trade for some white and that kind of thing. Now you got 10 different brands offering you 50 to 100 different colors.
Wow.
Yeah.
They're making skin tones of every race of person nowadays, specifically for doing portraits. They have these different transparency levels of white and black where you can do shading and lighting effects. So, there's all these, it's sort of a, if you build it, they will come kind of thing. Like, they're like, what do these artists need? Whereas back in the day, this stuff was meant for painting your lawn chairs,
Right.
So there's options. There's the tools are there and better.
Do you think that there's, because I've spray painted a lot of stuff over the years, at my work, right? And then for artwork, right? Spray paint metal frames. And what always kind of blew my mind was this, holding down the cap, having the spray paint come out, right? Why hasn't there been improvements into that? Or why hasn't there been more of a technological evolution into spray systems, I guess, when it comes to around
Well,
spray paint.
there has, you just don't see them on the surface. So a lot of it now is like the spray caps have evolved to be like a more, lots of different degrees of spray. The cans themselves have different pressure systems now to where you can buy high pressure, low pressure, stuff like that. And there's even stuff now. There's these, gadget guys. They'll invent like add-ons to cans where you can like clip a shield onto the front can with a pinhole so you can spray these little airbrush lines, that kind of stuff. And it's hit or miss. Sometimes you get a good one. Sometimes you get something that just makes a mess. So they're out there, but I think it gets to, it's like cell phones. Cell phones had a huge advancement for a while, and then they plateau because it's like, what else do you want?
Right.
And that's where we're at because everybody has, for the most part, what they need within reason in terms of like how does this can spray. So I'm sure, I mean, again in the future you might have cans where you press a button and it mixes a whole new color inside the can while you're working or something. But that's down the road, I'm sure. So yeah.
And, no rechargeable cans.
Yeah, and well, no, there are. I don't use them, and I've never tried. I've heard they're not great, but there are cans where you can get you can mix your own ink, and pressurize or your own paint and pressurize them. I know they use those in a lot of like countries where there's not like big retail.
Yeah,
they'll do stuff like that, and they'll even use like fertilizer sprayers, whatever they can get to pressurize paint.
I've seen that too with the pressurized sprayers that you use for your lawn.
Yeah, exactly.
Guys tagging with those to do big black letters.
Yeah, exactly.
So, so what do you see next for yourself and the artwork that you provide? And
yeah, I mean, I want to go. I do a lot of abstract murals around the city. I do a lot of commission work, but I want to start doing more three-dimensional work.
Gotcha.
So Dave and I had actually built a sculpture a couple of years ago called Line of Sight.
Very familiar.
And we try to get it out when we can. But I want to start really. I'm starting to apply actually right now for some projects for 2025, like in parks, like doing sculptural pieces. So I'd like to start creating pieces that are not only just art but also functional. Where if it's by a playground, can a kid somehow climb around on it safely? Right. That kind of thing,
Wow, I would love to see. Line of Sight is actually pretty dope. I've seen it in storage, and it's actually dope because it really looks like a piece of graffiti that someone kind of pulled off the wall and threw on the floor type of vibe.
Nice,
It really does have a weight to it. So,
I still have your foam model.
Oh, the foam model,
It's a collector's piece. I'm like, he's probably dying for this, but
yeah, I built a small model of it first, and then we
Nice.
basically deconstructed the whole thing like a puzzle, and then Dave templated it out, and then we blew up each piece individually. Dave cut them out by hand, so it's not like it was just slapped together by a machine shop. It was handcrafted, hand painted,
just like graffiti.
Yeah,
Comes
exactly.
from the mind into fruition through.
we're working at getting it out. It's a process here in Cleveland.
So I guess moving into, I'm more of an immersive art person. I love to get people into. I'm more of a culinary artist, but I use that to range into getting people involved with the events. What do you see as a potential immersive spray painting event or street art event? And I know this is kind of just like a shot in the dark type of question, may not have an answer, but what do you see when I say immersive art and graffiti? What comes to mind?
Well, I mean, obviously you have people that are in the graffiti scene or the street art scene doing live painting, but I also see the potential to have people who aren't getting a chance to paint, getting to try their hand. I always like to do that, like even the wall I was doing this weekend, my girlfriend brought her sister up who was in town. She's never touched a spray paint can in her life, but I'm like, you want to paint a section of this, and people were always like, wow, I get to try? I'm like, yeah, try it out. I explain it real quick, walk them through, and 9 out of 10 times they do a pretty good job,
Nice.
and they're excited, and they walk away with this like energized feeling of like doing something new, doing something creative, even if it's just filling in a small space. So inspiring people, really, I think that's what I'd like to take away from that kind of event. Yeah,
Love that.
You and Rich do some inspiring work when you guys
Thanks,
do
man.
when you guys do your cross collaboration.
Yeah.
You guys did stuff with like the space shuttle, right? Was
Yeah.
there one with the space shuttle was
Yep.
awesome.
Yeah.
Was there one with Marilyn Monroe?
We didn't
Was
do a
it-
Marilyn Monroe,
no,
but he does choose a
was
lot
it-
of like
Yeah.
female models
Yeah.
primarily. So there's different models he's chosen over the years, and then I'll work my work around and through it. Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
yeah.
He is is he also a graffiti artist?
No, Rich comes purely from just the art world.
Art world, okay.
So he's, he does public art things
Yeah.
with me. Like if we're commissioned, he and I have a collaborative wall over on West 28th in Detroit. But Rich primarily does his studio work for the most part. Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah.
So wait, what projects you're talking about? So you're applying for projects? Is that, I know the city released an RFQ for different parks.
Different parks. That's
so you
that's
applied for
yeah.
that one.
So I want to try and do the it's called Mercedes Park over by West Boulevard.
Yes.
So I've got my eyes on that one.
Okay.
Nice.
And potentially trying to do something with that. So
No,
yeah.
we haven't applied for any of that. I was looking at the budgets and I'm just like,
they're small by
they're
comparison.
small, and
yeah.
I'm just like, I don't know.
It's tough,
Like,
yeah.
But if definitely, I think that's exciting that you're applying and
Yeah.
you want to do some more sculptural stuff, because I think going back to line of sight, I think how revolutionary.
Yeah.
Should I throw that word out there? It's
Well, for me, it was because
Yeah.
it was the next step in my art. It was the first large-scale three-dimensional piece I had done.
Yeah, toot your own horn, man. It's okay.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
It's okay.
It's the fact that it's never been done here in the region is what makes it so fascinating.
And to me, I think I posted today, and this will lead into a question, but creating with fear in mind, doing something that kind of scary. You wake up thinking like, am I doing the right thing? Is this too big? Is this too much? I recently purchased a space that is way beyond the size of anything that I would have done. And every morning I wake up and I'm like, am I really supposed to be doing this?
You're looking around like, what am I going to do here?
What am I doing here?
Yeah.
So I guess what my question would be for you, what have you done that made you be like, am I supposed to be here right now?
That's a great question. Even after decades of doing this kind of work, I still get the butterflies in my stomach at certain types of things. I think for me, it's the size of a wall. Like when I get to these walls, I got a wall 2-3 years ago. They had a shoestring budget, but it was for a community that needed to have some artwork in their neighborhood.
Nice.
And they were also turning this vacant, overgrown lot that it butted up to into like a little mini park / walkthrough area. So I saw the potential. I saw how good it was going to be for this neighborhood. So I worked with the budget, and it was this like 25-foot tall by 100-foot long wall. It was a beast.
Yeah.
All right.
It's
And so I had to design something that, it looks good, but could there have been more to it? Yes. But it was like, okay, how high up can I get on this building? Because I can't get a lift up to it.
Right.
Like it just physically wasn't capable, like the terrain. So I'm working on ladders. And I also have to pay an assistant.
Right.
And I have to give them a fair salary,
Right.
so that they actually will want to come out. So it was like working all these angles of logistics and money and supplies, and like, how do we make this actually work in this gigantic of a space, And in the end, it worked, and it's cool. I eventually want to actually go back and add some of my own extras to it off my own resources.
Yeah.
But at the time, it really brightened up the space. It's up in like 147th and St. Clair, and the neighbors were super awesome as they started seeing what it was. They were really embracing, because it's just pure abstract, and so people were coming out asking a lot of questions from the neighborhood, and I was kind of giving people like a lot of insight as to what it was going to be and why I was painting there. So yeah, real cool.
Do you specifically stick to abstract for a reason? Is there something?
It's what I like, but somebody will call me, and they, like, literally one job is like, I want you to paint a classic car breaking through the wall of my garage, and I painted that on 152nd. I can do all that work. The only thing I steer clear of is portraits. I'm too much of a perfectionist. If something's a little off, it'll drive me crazy.
Gotcha.
But if somebody says paint an airplane on my building, paint SpongeBob, whatever, I can do it.
Gotcha.
The tricky part is budget. It's Cleveland, so when you're talking like at a mom and pop level, and you tell somebody like your price, they're like, oh, I didn't think it was going to have that many zeros after that. It's like, but paint costs this much, and a lift is this much a day, and this and that. And, I break it down. So like those jobs, they come and go. But I'm at a certain point in my career where I used to just take anything I could get. And like, they'd be like, I got $100. I'm like, I'll make that $100 work. And it was like, I spent 150 in paint. Now I'm negative 50, know?
Yeah.
So the abstract is more, it's what I want to be doing. And the people that either give me a wall to do it or commission me to do it, they understand what they're getting.
Right.
I've had restaurants hand me the keys. They say, you got all weekend. Nobody will be here. go crazy.
Right.
You know, you got your budget you need, like just do it up. And I did a restaurant once where it was every single table in the place, a couple feature walls, and the outside patio, and it was so much fun. I was just painting. They didn't even want to see mock-ups. They didn't care. They're like, we know what you do it.
Yeah.
So
You painted our bar.
the bar for
yeah.
you.
I didn't know that you knew our team member Packy.
Packy.
And so there was,
I painted his RV back in the day.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I called Bob. I'm like, oh yes, and then like the only thing I like want at the end of the day in a way after midnight closes down one of these days, I just want the bar.
Yeah,
it's a cool bar tops. Like
I'm real happy with that one, man.
The bar tops were cool.
Yeah.
I actually did the epoxy coating.
Oh,
on
did you?
them.
You did. Nice. That looks
to
slick,
protect
man.
them.
Let me tell you something. It's seen a lot.
Oh my god.
It's seen a lot of.
I'll tell you a real quick Packy story. It's funny. So he called me to do his RV, and it was in his parking lot at his house, and he's got a perfectly nice driveway, looks brand new. I set a tube of red paint next to my ladder, and it was open. And I'm like 6 feet in the air, and I'm in a hurry, and I come halfway down, and I jump off the ladder, and like in a cartoon, I land on this tube of paint, and it shoots a perfect red line across his driveway. And I'm like, oh my God. And I don't know this dude at the time. He's like, he's a stranger. And I had to like put my tail between my legs and go in his house like, hey man, this is what just, and he's like, oh, it's cool. Gets out the hose, just washes it away. And it was just red running down the driveway. I was like, oh my God. Yeah.
Packy's the most chill dude.
Yeah, he was super chill.
Yet the most craziest character in the world. Love Packy.
Yeah. So yeah, it's, it's just great to sit down and just
man, this is fun. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just get some of the backstories and, I guess just bring it all back to like what's one location you wish you would still go tag or haven't tagged you'd like to go tag?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now I'm like doing an aerial flyover of the city in my mind. Honestly, for the most part, I got everything I ever wanted back in the day. I mean, there was a point. I mean, I hate to say it like this, true. I'll never forget. Me and my dude Hanoi. We walked out at Public Square one day off the rapid. And we were going to go on a little bombing mission around Public Square. So we had markers and stickers and shit. And we looked around, and our tags were on everything. Every phone booth, RTA stations, there were stickers and stuff. And we're standing there like this, looking around in a circle. And we literally look at each other, we go, we did enough. And we like got back on the train and went home. And I mean, like, because we were just going nuts everywhere we went. It was like, we'd be walking down the street. My dude Verb back in the day, he was a huge, tall dude, about 6'4", 6'5". And he'd like climb up on my shoulders, put our names up here. So we're on like the middle of 117th Street. I'm standing on dude's shoulders, 12 feet in the air, writing Lost and Verbs, up in the middle. So if you ever see crazy stuff, you're like, how did they get up there? Yeah. We do weird shit, man. Yeah. So I mean, we were up.
And listen, Public Square was a real pre-2016. It was crazy. It was bad.
No, we were going nuts, man. I mean, we had the. I can say, listen, I'll be honest. We weren't the best in the city, meaning skill-wise. Like me and my friends. Like, there were people way better than us back in the day, but we had ups, meaning our name was everywhere. It was undeniable. It was on the freeways. It was on the billboards. It was, in the streets, on the RTA line. It was there, so we put in the work, and eventually I like to feel like I got better. And I'm even now. I mean, I'm 40. I'll be 48 in a couple months. I'm still learning. I'm learning from dudes half my age where I see them doing something, and I'm like, damn, that's slick, Yeah.
If you could shout out some of the artists that are out there right now, kind of give them a plug, people that you like their work with, maybe not have worked with, just watching what they do. There's great opportunity
that's good, man. I like
throw
that. Yeah,
some names out there.
So the first one that comes to mind when I was just talking about that is my dude Mikey Garcia. He goes by Fade Resistant Artist. He's my assistant on a lot of my big projects. He's the first guy I call, and he's like, early 30s now. I think that's about his age, so younger than me. And I'll never forget one of the first times we painted together, he kind of stopped painting for a minute to watch me because I was doing like chrome effect on a grill, like a bumper of a car. And I go, what's up, dude? You all right? He goes, no, I'm watching. I want to learn. And I looked at all the stuff he had been painting already. I go, I don't think there's much you can learn from me, man. I'm going to be learning from you soon. And sure enough, like, I have no problem walking up to Mikey and like, show me how to do this. We did a wall this summer. And I was like, hey, man, teach me how to do these like explosions you're doing. Like I want to do these like we were doing a Spider-Man themed wall, So he's showing me how to like fade out and blow out these colors. And, I don't have an ego like that. There's some artists that have an ego. This young kid can't show me nothing, No, man, I don't care if you're 10 years old, if you're doing some ill stuff, I'm like, yo, how do I teach an old dog a new trick
Right,
here, you know?
exactly.
Yeah.
And the kids learn the technology of things and learn the techniques faster
Oh, yeah.
than we did creating things that we needed at the time.
Right, because we were coming up with the grassroots stuff,
Yeah.
figuring it out. Nowadays, and I'm not saying they're figuring out new stuff too, but like they've got all the stuff we created,
Correct.
and
To
are
build
building
upon.
on it.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
exactly. Yeah.
So-
Instagram and YouTube.
Yeah, and then I love the new direction. I love the new art that's coming out. It's a lot of artists in the city that when I see their work, I'm like, this dude has gotten so much better than the first time I've seen this work.
The evolution of how quick now. It's so
Yes.
true, because back in the day, it would seem like it would take like 5-10 years.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
see stuff from a year before from a certain artist,
Yep.
you're like, okay, and a year later, you're like, that's you still?
Right.
Like, yeah, it's crazy. I've seen a couple artists like that. Yeah.
So yeah, I like to see it, to see it grow. And with Midnight Art Club, our objective is to tap into all the artistry on all levels and across all facets within the Cleveland area. So to me, graffiti is one of those ones that sit close to my heart because of the neighborhoods that I grew up in, some of the jobs that I took, some of the guys that I grew up with back in the day that, that would tag and do different things. It was part of the culture.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
what I mean? So for us, just seeing it go to where it's gone, from being the first kids of hip hop or the second or third generation, whatever we are in that 80s era. But
And graffiti started in America?
Yeah, I mean, it's, definitely in America for sure. I mean, I'm sure somebody in Europe was doing something graffiti, but I mean, it started in Philly and New York, like side by side. New York got a lot of the fame at first because it's New York,
Because it's New York,
and then, but, there was documented proof it's been coming out that like dudes in Philly, like in the 60s, like Cornbread and his crew were doing it. Even before Taki, like Julio 204 and those guys were in New York in the mid 60s.
So
yeah.
what was it born, from your perspective,
Yeah.
what was it born out of? Like what?
Boredom, I think. It was for a lot of the guys. Well, it was okay. Some of it was turf marking, like saying I'm from this neighborhood. And then a lot of it, they're like, I was just bored. There was nothing to do. Like, there wasn't like a rec center around, or there wasn't this or that. And I wasn't into basketball, or my neighborhood was too dangerous to go to the park, So I wandered around and wrote my name,
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, it saved my life. I mean, that sounds cliche, but like I grew up in a real rough neighborhood. I grew up poor as dirt. So I didn't have all the video game systems that the kids have. And I was kind of not a loner, but like my friends were all going and playing football and basketball, and I wasn't athletic, so I'd sit on the sidelines bored, So when I discovered graffiti, it was like this whole new adventure opened up for me in the city, where it was like, I'm going to go find this back alley and I'm going to write my name. I'm going to learn who this dude is and I'm going to meet him and we're going to paint together. And it became a whole new, like, just beneath the layer of the city, it was like this whole hidden world happening right in front of everybody. And I loved that, So it pulled me out of some real rough times. I mean, honestly, there were friends I grew up with who got in a lot of trouble with the law for serious crimes, or unfortunately aren't here anymore because of the lifestyle they live. And graffiti started to pull me away from that life, where we were still friends, but it's like, no, I'm not going to be doing all that dirt with you guys. I'm going to be over here doing art.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's great to hear that art can be a true medium for healing.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that we've talked personally about is your upbringing, right? And I think that's, to me, it's so fascinating because the story of your upbringing is, it's really moving. It's really motivating to see someone could come from being so poor, right, growing up in struggling circumstances, right, in the face of adversity, true adversity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've been on my own since I was 16,
Yeah.
So, I lived out of a backpack. I slept literally under a park bench one night, because I had nowhere to go. My dad left when I was 5. My mom died when I was 16, and I fell through the cracks of the system for a while. And I was in shelters and stuff like that. And, for one reason or another, I'd leave because it was dangerous or I just didn't want to be there. And so, graffiti was a big part of carrying me through that. It was literally a backpack with like 2 T-shirts, some socks, and my sketchbook. I have sketchbooks I've held on to that I still have from 1993, where it was like they're falling apart, but they're there because I was like, I don't care where I am in this world, traveling across the country, whatever. They're coming with me and they're at my side. And those books are still in a box right next to my bed where I sleep.
Would you be willing, I guess, to take pictures of your sketchbooks?
Oh, yeah.
And then put them out on display.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because once I get through this busy month here I have, as long as everything is done on the timeline I expect by the end of the month, I'm talking about doing a solo show at Graffiti Heart of a whole timeline of my work, going from graffiti into the modern work. And I work in a print shop, so I can print large scale of photos of my work from the 90s, 2000s, and I want to call it in the blink of an eye. So it's 30 years of work. Yeah.
Wow. And when do you think this is going to be?
This isn't an official date, so don't mark your calendar yet. But I'm looking at probably the first weekend of December potentially. Yeah. Because what I have to do, I've got all the stuff organized. I've been working on like an archive system, so it's all ready to go. But I have to write stories with it because if you look at it, it's cool to look at. But I want it when you look at this picture to understand why it's significant enough to be in this show. Right?
Do you have any video?
I don't. I wish I did. Back then, like there was like maybe one or two guys with a video camera, and it was like this big, you know. So it wasn't like now.
Shoulder piece.
Yeah, I wish.
Hard to run from the cops with a shoulder piece.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly, man. So I mean, I wish cameras were smaller back then. Yeah.
This sounds fascinating.
Yeah,
I look forward to that.
It sounds like it's
show.
going to be an amazing art show.
Well, and I'll tell you what, this is one of those, you guys are asking about the fear feeling of like doing something. I'm scared of doing this one. I'll be honest, because it's like, I asked somebody, I was like, is this like throwing your own birthday party? Is this weird? You know? And everybody's like, no, dude, do it. People want to see this show.
I tell Dave all the time, man, toot your own horn, man. You know, be your biggest fan in regards to artists. Because a lot of people don't realize what we put in to get out what we get out. They just see the finished product.
Yeah. Right.
And everybody thinks that it's easy. I remember going into culinary arts as a self-taught chef. I was like, I'm going to spend money to either go to college or to make mistakes. And I chose the road to make mistakes. And I realized it's really much cheaper to go to college. It really is.
Yeah.
To try to cater on your own, to try to do all the things that I attempted to do.
Yeah, trial by fire.
Oh my God. It was, I was like, I should have just went to college and got a job. But the passion was behind the road that it took me to get there.
Yeah.
So man, toot your own horn, man. You deserve a show. 30 years in the game is definitely deserving of someone being able to say, how did you survive 30 years in the game? That's the biggest question that I have is when people stick to something for so long, especially something like graffiti from the street level, make it through. I'm sure before I got here, there were some stories, and I'm sure there's more stories that can be told.
Yeah.
So when you make it through that,
and I think about that, man. I mean, I've outrun police helicopters. I've been attacked by wild dogs. I've gang members coming at me with guns. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've had to like run from cops. How many times I got tackled by cops, dragged around. You know. Man, it's rough. Even now, like, I mean, I'm almost, I'm 40. I'll be 48, and I'm up on a ladder this weekend. And it's raining on me, and my sketch is literally disintegrating in the rain, and I'm like, I gotta get this wall done. And even sitting here today, I mean, I finished yesterday after working 10 hours. My whole body is killing me today. Shoulders, knees, ankles, shot.
The age
and
start
I'm
to
like,
creep in.
But I'm like, I do it for the love, you know? Like
100%.
it's like I'm gonna do it until I can't, literally, and then I'll just get somebody like, put some yellow over here for me. I can't move. Right. You know?
Do they teach graffiti in schools at all?
Not officially. I mean, there's stuff like, how I mentioned like progressive arts line stuff. There's organizations that'll go around. It walks a thin line. Okay, so like graffiti artists who are still active, they kind of like thumb their nose at that idea because you're not supposed to learn it in a school. And I understand that. Like you're supposed to learn it in the streets.
Trial by fire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
because it shapes who you are. It's almost like rap. It's like someone teaching you to rap is kind of crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you have to embody the style that and it happens, don't get me wrong, but I don't want anybody any of the music people coming after me because I know it happens, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing that it happens. It's just a little bit different.
It's different.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like, okay, you had punk rock back in the day where people were, very DIY. It was underground. It was dirty.
Right.
And now, I mean, there's still that kind of punk, but there's also pop punk and stuff.
Right.
So, I mean, in another 50 years, there could be a graffiti university, and it's completely accepted, you know. Who knows? I mean, there's graffiti museums now.
Yeah.
There's a graffiti museum in Miami. If you would have said that 20, 30 years ago, like, what? Yeah.
Well, I have an idea that I'll probably talk to you off camera about. I don't want to put anything out there, but like I said, I'm really into immersive art. I want the people who purchase under the realm of what we're putting together to feel a part of the art that they create.
Okay.
And I think graffiti is one of those things. I know Sammy did it with an event here at Lounges just recently with a portrait of the mayor. We had people come in and kind of add to the portrait that he was creating.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And I saw that and I was like, Sammy's an amazing artist. His outlook is crazy, and that idea is, my brain just went crazy. So I came up with a couple ideas that I would, run past a few artists to see how we could just make it to where people in Cleveland, I think, deserve something different. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's up to us as artists to kind of get very creative, get very in our own pockets. Can't always be about making money in the beginning, but to create a tone for what people should expect from Cleveland artists.
I like it, man. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Where can we find you at on social media?
Bob Peck Art. So BOBPECKART at Instagram and Facebook. I don't do Twitter or TikTok. I'm an old dude, so TikTok is like whatever, But Instagram is where I post all my art. Facebook is where you're gonna find me just telling day-to-day goofy life stories and also showing some art too. Yeah.
Nice.
We look forward to your upcoming show.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, your solo exhibition give us a historical footprint.
You guys have pumped me up one step further into
I'm
doing it.
so excited
Talk
to
your
get,
stuff,
to
man.
get a historical perspective of graffiti art here in Cleveland from someone that's been in it for decades.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
I think it's a show that Cleveland absolutely needs, and then hopefully it fosters and grows further shows about what was graffiti like. I think you could do a show just about graffiti art just through the 90s.
Yeah, just the history, the documentation that you guys have of your own artwork. To me, definitely should see more of that coming about. So
and it is. I mean, I like showing the history because, I think the next generation needs to know where they came from. You know, that's the biggest thing,
And then, sitting here thinking, kind of lost the thought. So looking forward to your next solo show.
Thanks.
Looking forward to hopefully we can collaborate. That's what I actually wanted to sit there and say. Look forward to collaborating on further projects.
Yeah, for sure.
If we can, we're working with Nautica Entertainment right now, and we're in the preliminary stages. Sometimes it feels like it's somewhere. Hopefully getting the artwork out line of sight, and hopefully potentially maybe we can get more artwork out as well too.
Yeah,
in the West Bank of the Flats. So
sounds good.
Nice.
Appreciate you coming down today.
This has been fun, man. This is real cool.
Let's do it another time.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and
that's it.
Cool.
Okay, thanks so much.
Right.
See you.